The sun hung low over the alien planet Zetheria, casting a dim light on the chaos below. Once a beautiful world filled with vibrant colors and bustling cities, Zetheria now lay in ruins. The sky was dark with smoke, and the sound of explosions echoed through the streets. Panic spread like wildfire as the citizens ran for cover, their faces filled with fear and confusion. Above them, a massive warship from the Zoltrax Empire loomed ominously, its black hull blotting out the sun. Commander Lyra, a strong and brave warrior, stood on a high balcony, her heart heavy as she watched her home being torn apart. She had fought hard to protect her people, but this time felt different. The Zoltrax were relentless, and despite her best efforts, it seemed that their advanced technology and overwhelming numbers were too much to handle. "We can't hold them off much longer," shouted one of her soldiers, his voice filled with desperation. Lyra turned to her troops, trying to remain calm. "Regroup at the main square," she ordered, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. They needed a plan, something to turn the tide before it was too late. Her mind raced as she considered their options, but every idea felt more hopeless than the last. With each passing moment, the enemy drew closer, and her people needed hope now more than ever. In the square, her soldiers gathered, their faces showing signs of fear and uncertainty. They were exhausted from fighting, and many had lost friends and family in the chaos. "We are Zetherians!" Lyra shouted, her voice rising above the noise. "We have faced challenges before, and we will not back down now. We fight for our homes and our loved ones." The energy in the square shifted slightly as her words sparked a flicker of determination among her warriors. Suddenly, the sound of alarms blared through the square. "Commander, we've intercepted a message!" cried Vec, a young technician, his eyes wide with fear. "It's from the Zoltrax!" "What are they saying?" Lyra demanded, her heart racing. The thought of more bad news was almost too much to bear. "They're telling us to surrender or face total destruction by nightfall," Vec explained, panic evident in his voice. Lyra felt a wave of anger wash over her. The Zoltrax thrived on fear, and this was just another tactic to break her people. "We will not surrender!" she shouted, her voice echoing across the square. "We will resist until our last breath." The soldiers around her began to rally, their spirits lifting at her words. But deep down, Lyra felt a gnawing fear. She knew they were running out of time, and she needed to think of a new plan. Then, an idea struck her. A memory of a distant planet known as Earth and its people, the humans. They had been dismissed as primitive, but Lyra had heard tales of their bravery and fighting spirit. "Commander!" shouted Rax, her loyal lieutenant, breaking through her thoughts. "What can we do? We cannot hold out much longer." Lyra took a deep breath, considering her options carefully. "There is one last thing we could try," she said slowly. "We could reach out to the humans for help." The square fell silent. The suggestion hung in the air, and Lyra could feel the disbelief from her soldiers. "Humans?" Vec murmured, shaking his head. "They're just weak and untested. What can they do against the Zoltrax?" Lyra nodded, understanding their doubt. "They may seem weak, but they are fierce in their own way. If we can convince them to help us, we might just have a chance." Her voice grew stronger as she felt the urgency of the situation. "We have to try. If we don't, we will lose everything we hold dear." As her soldiers whispered among themselves, Lyra felt a spark of hope igniting in her heart. Perhaps this was their chance to forge an unlikely alliance with a race they had previously dismissed. With a heavy heart, but determined resolve, she activated the communication device, sending a distress signal to Earth, praying that someone would hear their plea for help. Little did she know, this decision would change the course of their destiny. With the Zoltrax closing in and their time running out, all they could do was wait and hope that the humans would answer their call. Would they stand together against the darkness, or would it be too late? The fate of Zetheria now rested on the uncertain shoulders of humanity. The sounds of destruction echoed through the ruins of Zetheria as Commander Lyra stood in the command center, her heart heavy with worry. The Zoltrax Empire was relentless, and their forces were getting closer by the day. As she looked around the room, she could see the faces of her fellow Zetherians, all filled with fear and uncertainty. They were strong, but the threat they faced was overwhelming. "Commander, we need to act now," said Vec, a loyal officer who had fought alongside Lyra for years. His blue skin glistened in the dim light of the command center, and his voice trembled with urgency. "If we don't make a move soon, we'll lose everything." The Zoltrax won't stop until they have destroyed us all. Lyra nodded, knowing he was right. The Zoltrax had already decimated several cities, leaving nothing but ash in their wake. I understand, Vec. But what can we do? Our forces are outnumbered, and they have advanced technology that we cannot match. Just then, a human soldier named Captain Jake Reynolds entered the room. He had been observing the situation closely and had a fierce determination in his eyes. We need to reach out to Earth for help, he said firmly. If we can unite our forces, we might stand a chance against the Zoltrax. They don't know how strong humans can be when we fight together. The room fell silent as Lyra considered Jake's words. Partnering with humans was a risky decision. While they had fought together during smaller skirmishes, she had doubts about whether they could truly work as a united force against the Zoltrax. But as she looked around at her people, she knew they needed hope, and Jake's suggestion was the best chance they had. Reaching out to Earth could bring more soldiers and technology, but what if they refuse to help us? Lyra asked, her voice heavy with concern. What if they see us as a lost cause? Jake stepped closer, his expression serious. We have to try, Lyra. The Zoltrax will not hesitate to destroy us. We can't wait any longer. If we stand by ourselves, we will fall. But if we reach out for help, we might just turn the tide. After a moment of hesitation, Lyra straightened her back and took a deep breath. You're right, Jake. It's a risk we have to take. We'll send a message to Earth, and if they agree to help, we'll prepare for their arrival. But we must also prepare for the possibility that they might not respond. The team quickly set to work, drafting a message that outlined the situation on Zetheria. They described the threat of the Zoltrax and the desperate need for assistance. Lyra felt a knot in her stomach as she watched them send the message into the stars, unsure of what the response would be. Days passed, each moment filled with tension and fear. The Zoltrax were closing in, their ships visible in the sky. Lyra spent every waking hour strategizing and preparing her people for the worst. She held training exercises and made sure everyone was ready for battle. Yet in her heart, she worried that no help would come. Then, one evening, a signal crackled through the command center. It was a response from Earth. Lyra rushed to the communication console, her heart racing. The screen lit up and a human general appeared, his face stern but determined. Commander Lyra, he said, we received your message. The Earth forces are ready to assist you. We'll send our best soldiers and technology immediately. A wave of relief washed over Lyra. Thank you. You don't know what this means for us. Together we can stop the Zoltrax, she exclaimed. We will coordinate our efforts and prepare for a united front. But know this, the Zoltrax are ruthless. We will need to be strategic in our approach. There's no room for error, the general warned. Lyra nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. We will prepare as best we can. Thank you for your support. As the message ended, the command center erupted with cheers. Hope filled the room, lifting spirits that had been weighed down by fear. They were not alone anymore. They had allies coming to fight beside them. In the days that followed, Lyra and Jake worked tirelessly to prepare for the impending battle. They trained together, combining Zetherian agility with human firepower. The two groups exchanged tactics, learning from one another and building trust. Every night, they gathered to share stories of their homes, forging bonds that would strengthen their alliance. As the date of the battle approached, Lyra knew they faced an uphill struggle. The Zoltrax were formidable opponents, but with the humans by their side, she felt a newfound strength. She had made a risky decision to reach out for help, but it was one that filled her with hope. On the eve of battle, Lyra stood on a hill overlooking Zetheria. The stars shone brightly above, a reminder of the vast universe beyond their world. She closed her eyes, envisioning a future where her people could live without fear, where Zetherians and humans stood united against oppression. Tomorrow they would face the Zoltrax together. Together, they would fight for survival. With a deep breath, she made a silent promise to her people and to herself. No matter the outcome, they would stand and fight as one. The sky over Zetheria was painted with deep shades of red and orange as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the war-torn streets. Commander Lyra stood anxiously at the communications center, her heart pounding in her chest. It had been hours since she sent the distress signal to Earth, and every moment felt like an eternity. The sound of explosions echoed in the distance, reminding her of the urgency of their situation. They were running out of time. Commander, the signal is still active, Vec, the young technician reported nervously. But there's been no response yet? Lyra nodded, trying to stay hopeful. They must be out there. We just need to give them time to respond. She turned to her lieutenant, Rax, who stood beside her, his face serious. We can't give up. If we lose faith now, we'll lose everything. Suddenly, a flickering light on the console caught their attention. Vex's eyes widened. Wait! I think I've got something! A response is coming in! The room fell silent as everyone turned to watch the screen, holding their breath in anticipation. The image of a human appeared on the screen, a young man with short brown hair and bright blue eyes. He looked confused but determined. This is Captain Jake Reynolds of the United Earth Forces. We received your distress signal. What is going on? Lyra felt a rush of relief. Thank you for answering our call, Captain Reynolds. We are under attack by the Zoltrax Empire, and they threaten to destroy our planet unless we surrender. We need your help! Jake's expression shifted from confusion to concern. The Zoltrax? We've heard about them. They're a dangerous enemy. How can we help you? Lyra took a deep breath, her mind racing with possibilities. We need technology, weapons, and soldiers. We can't defeat the Zoltrax alone. If we work together, we might stand a chance. Jake looked thoughtful for a moment. I'll need to gather my team and assess the situation. We may not have much time, but I can send a squadron to assist you. We'll need a secure location to land. Lyra nodded eagerly. We can meet you at the old factory near the city center. It's large enough to accommodate your ships and hidden from enemy sight. Understood, Jake replied, a spark of determination in his eyes. We'll be there as quickly as possible. Hang tight, Commander! As the communication ended, the room erupted into cheers. Lyra felt a wave of hope wash over her. They had allies now, real allies who understood the threat of the Zoltrax. Prepare the area for their arrival, she instructed her team. We need to be ready to coordinate our forces. As the Zetherians worked frantically to set up defenses around the factory, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. Would the humans truly be able to help? She had heard stories about their bravery, but she also knew they had never faced an enemy like the Zoltrax before. Still, she believed that together, they could create a force strong enough to stand against the darkness. Minutes felt like hours as they prepared for the arrival of the human forces. Finally, the sound of engines roared in the distance, and Lyra's heart raced. She rushed to the factory entrance along with her soldiers to greet their new allies. As the human ships landed, the doors opened, and a group of soldiers stepped out, led by Captain Jake. They were clad in sleek uniforms, carrying advanced weapons that glimmered in the fading light. "Commander Lyra!" Jake called out, waving as he approached. "We made it!" Lyra stepped forward, her heart swelling with hope. "Thank you for coming, Captain. We appreciate your support." Jake nodded, looking around at the Zetherian soldiers. "Let's not waste time. We need to strategize and prepare for the Zoltrax. Do you have any intel on their forces?" Lyra quickly shared what they knew about the enemy's positions and movements. As they spoke, she was struck by how easily the two groups communicated despite their differences. The humans were eager to learn about Zetherian tactics, while the Zetherians listened intently to the humans' suggestions. As the sun set and darkness enveloped the city, Lyra felt a surge of confidence. They were no longer just a group of desperate aliens. They were now a united force, fighting for their survival. With each passing moment, their bond grew stronger, fueled by a shared purpose and determination. "Tomorrow we fight together," Lyra said, addressing both her soldiers and the human troops. "We will show the Zoltrax that they have underestimated us." Cheers erupted around her, a powerful mix of Zetherian and human voices echoing through the factory. For the first time in a long while, Lyra felt a sense of hope. They were unlikely allies, but together they could face any challenge that lay ahead. With the dawn of a new day, they would stand united against the darkness, ready to defend their worlds. The morning light broke over Zetheria, casting a golden glow over the ruins of the city. Commander Lyra stood at the front of the factory, looking out at the gathering of soldiers. The Zetherians, with their bright blue skin and elegant features, stood side by side with the humans, whose diverse appearances and advanced technology were both foreign and fascinating to her. Together, they were preparing for a battle that could change the fate of both worlds. Lyra felt a surge of pride as she surveyed the scene. Captain Jake Reynolds was with his team, reviewing their equipment and sharing strategies with the Zetherian soldiers. They had worked through the night to strengthen their alliance, and now it was time to put their plan into action. The atmosphere was electric with determination, and she could sense that everyone was ready to fight for their survival. "Listen up, everyone!" Jake's voice rang out, gathering attention. "Today, we stand as one against the Zoltrax. We may come from different worlds, but we share a common enemy. Our combined strength is greater than we can imagine. Let's show them what we can do!" A cheer erupted from the gathered troops. Lyra felt her heart race as excitement filled the air. They were no longer two separate forces. They were an alliance united by a single goal. With a nod to Jake, she stepped forward to address both armies. "Today is not just about fighting for our planet. It's about fighting for our freedom, our families, and our future. We will protect each other no matter what comes our way," Lyra proclaimed, her voice firm and clear. "Let's make our stand and show the Zoltrax the true meaning of strength." As the soldiers prepared for battle, Lyra and Jake worked closely to finalize their strategy. They had studied the Zoltrax movements and discovered their main base of operations was set up nearby, hidden among the hills. If they could launch a surprise attack, it could give them the advantage they desperately needed. "Let's divide our forces," Jake suggested. "We can send a small team to create a distraction at the front, while the rest of us flank them from behind. With your advanced stealth technology and our firepower, we can hit them hard." Lyra nodded, impressed by Jake's tactical mind. "I'll lead the team on the flank. My soldiers are trained in close combat, and we can move quickly through the terrain. We'll need to coordinate our movements perfectly to avoid any surprises." As they finalized their plans, the mood shifted. The soldiers began to prepare themselves mentally and physically for the battle ahead. Some checked their weapons, while others practiced their battle cries, eager to channel their fear into courage. Lyra and Jake moved among the troops, offering words of encouragement and support. They saw the determination in the eyes of both Zetherians and humans. It was clear that they were all in this together. The camaraderie was heartening, and Lyra knew that their unity would be their greatest weapon. Just as they were about to leave, a loud siren blared from the Zoltrax camp. Jake's eyes widened. They must have detected our preparations. "We need to move now! Everyone take your positions!" Lyra shouted. The troops scrambled into action, quickly following their leader's orders. They knew that time was running out, and the element of surprise was crucial. As they moved out, the sight of the Zoltrax warships came into view. The dark ships hovered ominously in the sky, their engines humming with power. But now, the Zetherians and humans were not just looking at them in fear, they were ready to fight back. The team split as planned. Lyra led her group through the dense forest, moving stealthily towards the enemy's rear. Jake and his team created a distraction at the front, firing their weapons to draw attention away from Lyra's group. The sounds of explosions and gunfire echoed through the air, fueling Lyra's adrenaline. "Stay low and keep moving," she commanded her team as they navigated through the underbrush. They were getting closer to the enemy's base, and she could see the flickering lights from the Zoltrax's camp. Finally, they reached their position behind the enemy lines. "This is it!" Lyra whispered, feeling the weight of the moment. "On my mark, we strike!" As she prepared to give the signal, she felt a wave of solidarity among her soldiers and the humans. Together, they had formed an alliance that transcended their differences. They were fighting not just for Zetheria, but for something much bigger, a shared future where they could protect their worlds from tyranny. 3, 2, 1, now! Lyra shouted, and with that, they charged forward, ready to unleash the fury of their alliance upon the Zoltrax. The battle for their freedom had begun, and they would fight side by side, united in their cause. The air was thick with tension as Commander Lyra and her team charged toward the enemy lines, their hearts pounding with adrenaline. Behind them, the sounds of battle erupted as Captain Jake and the human forces launched their attack. Explosions shook the ground, and flashes of light illuminated the darkening sky. They were in the thick of it now, fighting for their survival against the powerful Zoltrax Empire. "Stay close," Lyra shouted, urging her team forward. They had to move quickly to exploit the chaos created by Jake's team. The Zoltrax were strong, but they were also overconfident. They never expected a united front from Zetherians and humans, and that was their greatest weakness. As they neared the enemy camp, Lyra spotted a group of Zoltrax soldiers gathered around a large weapon. It looked like a massive energy cannon, powerful enough to obliterate anything in its path. "We have to take that out," she whispered to her team. If they fire it, we're done for. With a nod, her soldiers prepared to strike. Lyra signaled for them to take cover behind a fallen tree. On my mark, she said, her heart racing. 3, 2, 1, go! They burst from their hiding spot, rushing toward the Zoltrax. The enemy soldiers barely had time to react as Lyra and her team launched their surprise attack. Blasters fired, and the air crackled with energy as bolts of light flew through the air. Lyra's aim was true, and she took down 2 Zoltrax soldiers before they could raise their weapons. "Keep pushing forward!" she yelled, leading the charge toward the energy cannon. Her soldiers fought valiantly, a mix of Zetherian agility and human firepower working together seamlessly. The Zoltrax soldiers were taken by surprise, and their lines began to falter. Meanwhile, Captain Jake and his squad were engaged in a fierce battle at the front lines. The humans were well trained, their tactics honed from countless battles. They moved like a well-oiled machine, supporting each other as they fought against the Zoltrax forces. "We've got to hold them back!" Jake shouted, firing his weapon into the fray. "Don't let them regroup." Back with Lyra, the battle for the energy cannon was intense. They were almost there, but the Zoltrax were regaining their composure and fighting back fiercely. Lyra ducked behind cover, breathing heavily as she assessed the situation. "We need more firepower," she shouted. "Vec, use your plasma grenades." Vec nodded, quickly pulling out a grenade and tossing it toward the cluster of Zoltrax soldiers near the cannon. The explosion rocked the area, sending Zoltrax flying and giving Lyra and her team the opening they needed. "Now's our chance!" Lyra yelled. They sprinted forward, reaching the base of the cannon. She could see the control panel and knew that if they could disable it, they might turn the tide of the battle. "Cover me!" she shouted as she dove toward the controls. Her soldiers fired at the remaining Zoltrax, keeping them at bay while Lyra worked. She began to dismantle the control panel, her hands shaking with adrenaline. The beeping sounds of the cannon warned her that time was running out. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the ground nearby, knocking Lyra off balance. "Lyra!" a voice called. It was Rax, rushing to help her. "We've got to hurry." "I'm trying!" she shouted back, focused on the wires and circuits. "If I can just—" Before she could finish, a Zoltrax soldier charged toward them, blaster raised. Rax reacted quickly, shooting the soldier before he could fire. "Got your back?" he said, breathing heavily. With renewed focus, Lyra finished dismantling the panel just as another explosion shook the ground. "It's done! We need to move!" she yelled, pushing herself away from the cannon. They had to regroup with Jake's team before they were overwhelmed. The sound of battle filled the air as they fought their way back through the chaos. The sight of Zetherians and humans battling side by side was inspiring. They were making a real difference, holding their ground against the Zoltrax forces. Just then, Lyra spotted Jake in the distance, fighting off several Zoltrax soldiers. "Jake!" she called out, running toward him with Rax by her side. "We took out the cannon. We need to push forward together." Jake turned, relief washing over his face. "Great work, Lyra. We can turn this around. Let's rally our forces and hit them hard." Together they rallied their troops, the combined strength of Zetherians and humans creating a wave of determination that surged through the battlefield. "For our worlds!" Jake shouted, raising his weapon high. "Let's finish this!" As they charged forward, the ground shook with the sound of their unified battle cry. The Zoltrax forces began to falter, and Lyra felt a surge of hope. This was their chance to not only survive, but to show the universe that they would not be defeated. With each step, they grew stronger together, proving that in unity there was power. They were fighting for their survival, but more importantly, they were fighting for each other. The battle raged on, and the alliance of Zetherians and humans was ready to claim victory. The air in the chamber grew thick with tension. The soldiers began to move, their enhanced senses alert as they stepped closer to Korak's team. There was no hesitation in their movements, no sign of fear or doubt. They were machines of war, designed to fight and conquer, and now they were free. "We need to leave," Korak said quickly, turning to his team. The soldiers were already gathering around, their weapons raised, their bodies tense and ready for battle. The once dominant aliens now found themselves face to face with a force beyond their understanding, and their only option was to escape. But as the soldiers prepared to leave, the leader of the super soldiers spoke again, his voice ringing with cold finality. "You cannot escape what has been awakened. We will finish what was started. Humanity's legacy will rise again." Korak's team had no time to react. The super soldiers moved faster than the aliens could follow, their strikes powerful and precise. Korak barely managed to dodge a blow that would have killed him instantly. The rest of his team was not as lucky. In that moment, Korak understood the true scale of the disaster they had unleashed. Humanity's legacy had awakened, and it was a force that even the aliens could not control. These super soldiers were not just weapons. They were the key to a long-forgotten war, a war that had been buried by the humans themselves, but not forgotten. And now the consequences of that war were about to unfold. The chamber was filled with chaos. Korak and his surviving soldiers fought desperately, but they were no match for the super soldiers. As the dust settled, it became clear that the battle had only just begun. The true war, the one humanity had started so long ago, was awakening, and it was about to consume everything in its path. The battle raged on, echoing through the underground chamber like thunder. General Korak and the remaining members of his team fought desperately, their weapons firing at the super soldiers who moved with deadly precision. But no matter how many shots they fired, it seemed like the super soldiers were always one step ahead, their enhanced bodies dodging and countering every attack. The alien forces were outmatched, and Korak knew it. The once proud warriors of his army were being cut down one by one, their advanced weapons useless against the unstoppable might of humanity's legacy. Korak himself was barely holding his ground, his energy running low and his mind racing for a way out. But there was no escape. The super soldiers were everywhere, and they were relentless. "You should not have come here," the leader of the super soldiers said, his voice cold and emotionless. "You cannot stop what has already begun. Humanity's legacy will rise again, and there is no place for you in this new world." Korak's mind raced. The humans had created these warriors for one purpose, to protect themselves from any threat. But now that purpose had been corrupted. The soldiers were not here to protect, they were here to conquer. They were ready to restart the war that had been buried for centuries. But there had to be a way to stop them, a way to save his people. As he fought, Korak realized something important. The super soldiers were not just programmed for war, they were part of a larger plan. They were part of humanity's final solution to their greatest fear. The humans had feared their own creations, and so they had hidden them away, hoping to never awaken them. But now the world had changed. These soldiers were free, and their creators were long gone. In the midst of the chaos, Korak had an idea, a desperate plan that could either save or destroy everything. He had learned something in the underground chamber, something that could change everything. The super soldiers were not invincible. They had one weakness, a flaw in their programming, a flaw that had been hidden deep within their creation. "We can stop them," Korak's voice rang out, cutting through the noise of battle. He wasn't sure if anyone could hear him, but he had to try. He had to make them understand. "We don't have to fight this war. We can shut them down, end this before it's too late." For a moment, the room fell silent. The super soldiers paused, their glowing eyes locking onto Korak. The leader's gaze softened, just for a second, as if considering his words. "You think you can control us?" the leader said, his voice low but dangerous. "You cannot stop what was meant to be. We were made to ensure humanity's survival, and now we will do the same for ourselves." Korak's heart raced. He had no more time. His soldiers were falling, and the chamber was closing in around him. The super soldiers were too powerful. But there was still one chance. He had to take the risk, or everything would be lost. "Listen to me," Korak shouted, his voice full of desperation. "The humans are gone! The war they feared is over. But if you continue this path, you will destroy everything. There will be nothing left to fight for." The leader of the super soldiers took a step forward, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light. "We are humanity's legacy. We were created for one purpose, to fight and win. That is what we will do." Korak knew that reasoning with them wasn't working. It was now or never. He made his move, rushing to the control panel that he had spotted earlier in the chamber. It was a long shot, but it was their only hope. If he could access the panel, he might be able to activate the shutdown sequence for the super soldiers, just like he had learned in the records from the old human technology. As he typed furiously at the console, the leader of the super soldiers advanced toward him, his footsteps heavy with the weight of impending doom. Korak could hear the pounding of his own heart in his ears. the sound of his team fighting in the background growing quieter as they were overwhelmed. Sweat poured down his face, but he refused to give up. "Stop him!" the leader commanded. But it was too late. With a final press of a button, the chamber lights flickered, and the machines powering the super soldiers began to whir and hum. The soldiers froze for a brief moment, their eyes dimming as the shutdown sequence took effect. Korak's heart skipped a beat. The plan had worked. But there was no time to celebrate. He had made the ultimate choice. He had decided to risk everything, to shut down the warriors that had awakened, and in doing so, he had saved his people. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Korak collapsed to his knees, exhausted but alive. His soldiers were gone, the super soldiers were deactivated, and the war that had been started so long ago had ended. But as he looked around the dark chamber, Korak knew that the price had been high. The cost of stopping the super soldiers was steep, but humanity's legacy had been put to rest. And now it was up to him to rebuild what had been lost and ensure that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated.